Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Governments often measure public transport success by kilometres built or trains delivered. But according to a new Khazanah Research Institute study, commuters, however, measure the success of public transport beyond infrastructure. They measure it through reliability and predictability and user experience. So joining me on the show to discuss this further, his research on Greater Kuala Lumpur Mobilities is the lead author of the report from Khazanah Research Institute, Gregory Ho. Greg, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. I appreciate your time. This report is fascinating because one of the things that struck me the most was you used this phrase that public transport in Greater KL, quote, works well enough to use but is fragile enough to be set aside. And I found that quite fascinating. If we could begin a conversation there, what did you mean by that phrase? And what does that mean in practical, everyday terms for commuters?
Thank you, Melissa, for having me. Well, the phrase works well enough to use, but fragile enough to be set aside. So what we found is that many people actually like the different aspects of using public transport. Our respondents consistently describe driving as something that is stressful, and public transport sorts of gives many people this chance to repurpose their time to read, to work, or just decompress. But this system is fragile because commuters have very little tolerance for disruption. So, for example, through no fault of your own, if you have missed the bus, or if there is a disruption that has caused you to perhaps wait for longer than 2 hours, these things have a tendency to outweigh all these benefits. And for people who have alternatives, that's enough to push them to back to driving, even though it is a more stressful or a more expensive experience.
Right. I can relate because I too find driving quite stressful, particularly in KL. I want to talk about the different types of public transport. So we probably should break it down to rail systems that seem to be viewed more positively. Buses appear to be where the fragility lies, where the trust breaks down for commuters. Talk to me, Greg, about why buses seem to be the most fragile part of our public transport system here in Greater KL.
Well, buses are fragile because they carry the most uncertainty. With the rail systems, in a sense, all you need to do is sort of reach the station and you can be fairly confident that you will get to where you need to go. But with buses, commuters sort of have to estimate the arrival times on the fly. You have to deal with the long waits, and oftentimes once you make the trip, you find yourself in a waiting condition let's just say that it could be more comfortable. So when these uncertainties sort of stack up, especially under the heat or the heat or the rain, people sort of feel less confident about the entire journey.
Right. Yeah, waiting conditions are really important, and I'm glad that your report highlighted the role of bus stop infrastructure, and also the fact that many bus stops here in Greater KL lack that basic amenity of, I guess, even shelter from the heat, the sun and the rain. Seating also is not available. Why do you think that these seemingly small details of a bus stop infrastructure matter so much for ridership decisions? When we make a decision of whether or not to take public transport, things like this matter to commuters.
That's a great question, Melissa. So bus stops matter because they actually form a much larger part of the bus journey. So earlier we spoke about the MRTs and the LRTs, right? With the MRTs and LRTs, if you miss the train when you arrive at the station, the next one is coming the next 4 to 8 minutes. But this is not the case with buses. So if you go to the bus stop, you should expect that the wait to be relatively longer. So in that context, the shelter, the lighting, the bench, and all the amenities of the bus stop becomes so much more important. So these things shape whether or not people feel safe, comfortable, and willing to even wait at all.
Your study also pointed to the fact that there is a difference between MRT feeder buses and rapid KL buses. Can we talk about the difference? Why were the MRT feeder buses more consistent, more reliable compared to rapid KL buses?
So we, in our study, we found that the MRT feeder buses were very reliable. I think they have an on-time performance of more than 90%. So that's a good benchmark to be in. So what the data suggests is that the MRT feeder buses benefit from clarity of purpose. So number one, they serve shorter routes. They are designed specifically to bring people from high density places to stations. And in a sense, this is a more controlled environment, whereas many of the other routes in the rapid KL bus routes, they have to do much more complex complex work across even congested roads. So that leads to how I suppose the metrics of their performance is not as reliable as the MRT feeder buses.
Okay, that's quite interesting. So I guess rapid KL buses serve a different purpose than MRT buses, but are there things that rapid KL buses can learn from the efficiency and the reliability of MRT feeder buses?
Yes and no. And this is a tough one. So for one, we detected that there is a large number of you call it headway deterioration in MRT. Sorry, not in the MRT, in the rapid KL buses. That we do not really observe in MRT feeder buses. In a sense, they interact so much more with traffic. So our policy recommendations in relation to that is that we need to implement measures so that buses can move more like trains, and we have often read of how people are calling for bus lanes, but one of the things that we are pushing for is something called conditional transit signal priority, and that is sort of like a system to keep the green light green a little bit longer if the bus is already late.
Oh, that's so interesting. I find that a lot of people, when you talk about public transport, they think the way to fix it is through large capital spending, build more infrastructure, mega projects galore. But one of the things that your report pointed out is that you actually don't need new infrastructure. What you need are operational fixes. So maybe you can walk us through some of the operational fixes that KRI is proposing.
Thank you for that. Let me caveat that a little bit. So personally, I do believe that large investments are at times necessary, but they are not at all sufficient. So many of the problems that arise from our research is that the problems are more basic. Actually, basic may not be the right word. They're more human, right? So it has to do with how people feel that the information is unclear. It has to do with how buses leave early, and it's your general walking experience, actually, whether it is unsafe, uncomfortable, and whatnot. So fixing these human issues, like how information is provided, preventing early departures, and giving buses priority when they are late, improving pedestrian access, I think these various small parts of the journey can restore trust quickly. So in a sense, these are not operational fixes that require large spending, and they don't replace existing infrastructure. Rather, these are the catalyzing points that support and make our infrastructure work.
All right. Greg, you mentioned information, the need for clear and trustworthy, I guess, information that you can trust. Can you elaborate more about how to make that work to improve the bus system, in particular in KL?
Okay. In particular, the bus system, yeah. So if you have used the My Rapid Pulse app before, what you would observe is that it gives you the scheduled time from when the bus is going to leave the terminal. The terminal here is actually the first bus stop in the route. So let's say you're on the sixth bus stop. You have to sort of like do a mental calculation on the fly, and it says the ETA is 12 minutes. The bus is leaving this stop. Will it really arrive in 12 minutes? How early should I be? How early should I get there, right? So two of our recommendations is number one, to publish the scheduled arrival time at every bus stop, so that commuters know that the bus will be here, say at 10:30, and then I have to get there before 10:30. And number two, they in a sense they do this already. They publish the estimated time of arrival for the next bus, but I think in a lot of other countries, you also publish the next two buses. So if you know that you are going to miss the following bus, then knowing when the second bus is going to arrive, I think that goes a long way in helping people craft their travel journeys.
And these are feasible fixes, right? Providing real-time information that way is something that is largely feasible to be implemented in Malaysia?
It's very feasible. In fact, I believe the operators have the data already, and the only reason why we can sort of like do this study is because MyRapid makes this data open.
Can I ask you about that, Greg? Why did you embark on this study? It's an interesting one. I feel like it's providing data and evidence to something we all suspect. Public transport users know this on a daily basis. Can I ask you what you're hoping to achieve from this?
So we started this study. Well, in KRI, we have sort of like this cities team that looks into issues of how do we make our city more productive, how do we make it more prosperous, and share that prosperity with everyone. So we know that public transport is a very crucial part of making Greater Kuala Lumpur work. And we have been looking at the figures for quite some time, and we find that maybe there have been a lot of improvements of late, but I think we are still a long ways to go to sort of realize our ambitions to make this city one that is more public transport oriented. And so maybe the first intuition that I had was to just talk to people and find out what from the perspective of people who use these systems every day, how would they frame the issues?
Right, and I thank you for it. I think the report, the research is really resonating with a lot of KL denizens. So I appreciate your time. Greg Ho from Khazanah Research Institute there. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be back with more on this topic. So don't go anywhere. Stay with Consider This. We'll be right back. Hi, welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris. Let's continue our discussion about public transport in Greater KL. This after a report by Khazanah Research Institute found that public transport in KL is good enough to use, but not reliable enough to depend on. So can reliability and predictability and commuter trust be restored in public transport? Joining me now is Associate Professor Dr. Teik, who is the head of the Road Safety Research Centre at UPM. Dr. Lau, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. So we've just heard from Gregory Ho about public transport in Greater KL. It often works, but only just that. It's so fragile. It's fragile enough, the trust of commuters in it, that people might abandon it quickly from a delay or an inconvenience. I'm just wondering, from a planning perspective, does that diagnosis ring true to you?
Okay, to my view, I think this diagnosis is true. And in fact, if you look at our public transport system, we shouldn't call it as a service. So we can have the Grab service, we can have the taxi service. But when we talk about public transport, it's a system. So how system well in design, in the operations, in the policy to provide you a tip-top service. So in order for the policymakers to attract people to use the public transport, if you compare our country, Malaysia, with some other country, like I live in London for a couple of years. My professors during that time, all of them, they use public transport. They seldom say that they drive to school. And furthermore, in London, driving is not very convenient. It's very costly. So that's why we have to think about how are we going to design the public transport in such a way, one day, I will be one of the users of the public transport.
All right. So what we also learned from the KRI report was that rail doesn't seem to be as much of a problem. So rail systems seem to be viewed more positively by commuters, but it's the buses. So bus systems are seen to be maybe the weakest link, if I may use that, in terms of urban mobility systems. Can you talk to me about that? Because buses are supposed to be, I guess, the most flexible, the most scalable, the most easily designed mode of public transport. Why is it often the least reliable and the weakest link?
Okay, and when we talk about if we compare rail and the bus, we need both of them work well together. We cannot say that we only rely on bus. Well, rail is okay. But when we talk about rail service, of course, I can't deny that when there is a breakdown, okay, it will be like become a target by the media. So everyone know that everyone will have a very bad impression. But even though I say this, it's not like I want to defend the operator of the rail service. So, but we have to know that, okay, if we compare with other countries in terms of the failure, I asked my student from China, because here they are the frequent user of MRT and LRT, and they always suffer because of the breakdown. That I have to fetch them out from the station. Then I ask them the question: is this happens in your country? The answer is no. So yes, when we compare in our country, rail and the bus even give bigger problem, okay, compared to rail service. But I think this is easy to understand that, okay, because rail they have their own path move, but bus they have to join with the traffic. When there's traffic jam, as we know that traffic jam can happen anytime, and it's getting more and more serious. According to my database, I take like LDP as examples. Within 6 months, the jam increased quietly but substantially by 30%. We don't know because we never check. It happened gradually. Then we think that, oh, it's the same jam but the thing is that when the bus moving, they move together with the car. Yes, we have the bus lane in KL, but only in KL, and it's not actively used. You can see that the enforcement is at a very low level. Okay, so that's why, because of this, when there's a jam, then the bus will be interrupted seriously. And the other thing is that because of we don't have the good information, I don't know, maybe it's our cultures. Data collecting data and apply data is not our cultures. So that's why we spend not enough resources in doing this. And if we have the good data, I'm talking about huge data, then we can use the AI to help us to monitor, to manage the bus service. And because of this, that's why it's quite difficult for us to predict the mobility of the bus. Once we fail to predict, then it means that we are going to waste longer time.
Right.
So because of this, that's why people are not going to use bus service.
Dr. Lau, can you just repeat so that I understand correctly? Did you say that in the last 6 months, LDP has increased 30% in terms of traffic congestion?
Yes, in overall. But this is just one example, because just coincidentally, I take LDP as an example.
Right. Yes, it's an example of traffic congestion growing, but no one's really monitoring how fast and how steadily it's growing. Thank you for sharing that information with us. Coming back to buses, and you talked about the bus lanes, and I wonder how important is the allocation of road space, having those kind of bus lanes, having priority in terms of when there is congestion. How much of that can actually improve bus service reliability?
Okay, this depends on whether we are talking about full-time or part-time bus lane. Maybe many people never heard about part-time. So yeah, but of course, full-time will give more promising service. Okay, that what we have in KL. We still have the bus lane, but just in the city centers, the middle of the KL city. And sometimes we also have to think about whether we need more. Of course, the answer is yes. Can we utilize some part-time? Means that during non-peak hours, is a car park, for example, is a car park, is a roadside car park. Then during the peak hour, it can become the bus lane. So to fully utilize the space in the city centers, I think this is something the policymakers should think about it. And if we talk about bus lane, yes, we need so that it can move seamless, move in the higher speed. Of course, many people will be unhappy But I say that no pain, no gain. Seriously, it's a transition.
Yeah, right. How much would you say, Dr. Lau, is Greater KL's public transport system or underuse of KL's public transport system? How much of it is a first and last mile problem? I'm wondering, and if not just limited to buses, but are there ways to improve first and last mile connectivity that we haven't considered or we haven't fully leveraged or utilized yet?
In fact, we have the government have done some things on it. So we have the on demand, but until today we haven't received any announcement by the government the how successful it is. And if you look at some successful cases like in China, they have the what you call the bicycles. What you call the there is plenty of the bicycle there. You can use it anytime. You just put in the money. Or now they don't put the coin. They use the phone to pay. We have this. I don't know whether you still remember. Many years ago in KL, we have this, but it's failure. But of course, then if people can make it successful, why not? Why we can't? So we have to learn from them. And worst come to worst, we need to maintain the on-demand service because not everyone can ride on bicycles. But for those can ride on bicycle, maybe for them it's more convenient to use it. Either we have to investigate. I think the bicycle itself has no problem, but I'm talking about the road environment. Are they safe enough? And also the punishment. If you make naughty things, you spoil the bicycle. Of course, I believe that the same thing might happen in China. They managed to do it. Why not? Why we can't?
Right. How much does pedestrian infrastructure fit into public transport planning? I'm just wondering because, I mean, if you look at some areas, right, either urban areas or suburban areas, there are areas where you can't drive close enough to the nearest public transport access, but there are areas where you can walk. However, commuters say it's not safe, it's too hot, it's not comfortable. How should we think about that planning for pedestrian infrastructure?
I think first of all we have to think about the education. Yeah, like what you said just now, hot. Okay, I think this is what we call in Malay is manja lah. Okay, other countries also have the same, more or less the same problem. But at the same time, we also have to think about whether we will provide sufficient or adequate facility for them to use. I'm talking about the pedestrian. So if you look at our pedestrian facility in the KL, I would say that it's quite limited. It's quite limited. It's not properly connected. You will notice that if you walk on the footpath, halfway you have to walk to the road. I think this is very, very common. We are talking about the connectivity. If I see this problem, straight I will complain. I say I'm not going to use it. There's a good excuse. Okay, I think this is something that the policy have to look into. And I strongly believe that this thing must be handled more than one department or more than one ministry. So to solve the problem. And at the same time, we also have to find a way to reduce the entries of the vehicle into the town. So that's why I always say that road pricing is one of the methods we have to go for it. And I believe that there is many political barriers, but we have to. And there are many successful cases. The nearby ones, the Singapore. I think Singapore is the earliest country, one of the earliest country in the world implement this. And until now, they are quite enjoyable.
Right. You're talking about the congestion charge, is it, for city centre driving? Okay, right. Dr. Lai, you mentioned that this requires coordination from more than one ministry. Which ministries are you thinking about? Who are the stakeholders here?
Okay, at least two in my mind. Okay, like for example, the DBKL. Okay, DBKL and the KKR. Okay, DBKL said that, this is my territory. KKR said, yes, this belongs to DBKL. But they have to work together. And otherwise, then you will see the disconnectivity in the preparation of the facility.
Right. Okay, and there are people who say if you want to get public transport to be used by more people, build more, have more rail tracks, have more highways, have more have more train carriages. All of these, I think, require quite significant capital expenditure, which may not be in Malaysia's future at this point in time. Are there low-hanging fruit, quick wins that Malaysia, particularly Greater KL, can adopt to make sure that our city dwellers use public transport more?
I think my answer is yes. Don't always think big, and we know that we like big things.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so they can be highly visible. Okay, can be seen by other people. Of course, we have to pay. It's not come free. We have to pay big money, and I don't think that at this moment we are afford. So if you ask me to continue to build more MRT, LRT to complete the line, I strongly agree. If you afford to do so, building more highway to increase the mobility within the KL city center, I don't think so. Okay, it will mess up the traffic, and we are blurred because of this. Increase more LRT, MRT, or build more highway. They are contradicting among each other. When you build highway, so it means that you prefer to stay in car, not on the train. Okay, so this is the thing. And the other thing is that we are not talking about building more, but we have to make sure that they are fully utilized. Fully utilized, there are two aspects. One aspect is we have to encourage more people to use it, and persuade them is useless. If persuade work, then there's no problem. So that's why they have to think about the policy. I think the MOT have done a good job. They give a subsidy, the card, the 50 card. Okay, I think they give 20 card. Okay, I think this is very good, and they have to continue. And they have to expand it to other layer of the society. The other thing is that we have to think about have we fully utilized the resources we have now? The answer no. Okay, one, because of the integration, the coordination. Okay, like for example, that we are talking about because the service is handled by different operators. Okay, then they have no a good talk among each others. Okay, they think that they think that they have done a good job. Indeed, they have done a good job, but overall no. So they have to work together. So that's why we have to think about maybe it's time for us to advise the policymakers to develop a special department to look into this issue, not only to handle the public transport in KL, but in any big city in Malaysia. Okay, to make sure that the thing is their different service, they are properly integrated, collect the data, implement the application of AI. Okay, because when we talk about public transport, we are not talking about one or two trains. We are talking about many trains, many cars, millions of people. So we need to collect all this information to help them to plan properly, so that this can help us to fully utilize our resources without thinking building the mega project. Maybe that one will come later, definitely not now.
Definitely. It can definitely improve what we currently have. Dr. Lau, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. Dr. Lau Teik there from UPM's Road Safety Research Centre, wrapping up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris, signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching, and good night.